1. I'm a 25-year-old female. This happened to me last year. I lived in a small town, not really a dangerous town, but it was becoming overrun with a lot of heroin addicts. The houses were all small ramblers, and there was maybe 50 feet between you and your neighbor's house. I lived on a corner lot with my pit bull. Due to the close proximity of the houses, I didn't have much of a yard for my dog to run around in, nor was it fenced in. When it was dark, or I didn't have time to walk her to the nearby park, I would hook her up to a yard leash I had connected to my small side deck. As a house in the corner, I didn't have a backyard, just slivers of land on each side of my house. Enough for her to run around a little to do her business. One night, a little after midnight, my dog and I were lying in bed watching Netflix, when she gets the sudden urge to pee. She jumps up and starts crying by the kitchen door, which leads to the little deck on the side of my house. I lazily get out of bed, put on my robe, turn on the dim deck light, and hook her up to the leash. It was a nice summer night and clear skies, so I waited with her outside and looked at the stars. My dog wasn't one to do her business and come back inside. She has to sniff every inch of the yard before she's ready. At this point, she's sniffing behind the shed out of sight. That's when I could hear a ratty car making its way down my street. My neighborhood has speed bumps to keep cars slow, so I could hear this car long before I would see it. This late at night, everything is silent, but it wasn't uncommon for a random person to be walking home from the bar in a drunken haze, or people going to work their graveyard shifts. I thought nothing of the car and continued waiting for my dog. She was still out of sight behind my shed when I saw the ratty old car about to pass my house. The driver must have noticed me too, because he stopped, on top of a speed bump, and parked in the middle of the street. The idle car was actually pretty quiet. I wasn't scared or nervous at first, just really confused. Was he drunk? Is he about to do drugs in his car? And before I could think of another explanation, he opens his car door and slowly starts getting out, making eye contact with me. It was dark, but he was definitely staring at me. He was a large, husky man, at least 6 feet tall. I was surprised he could fit comfortably in that tiny little sedan. He gets out of the car, leaving the door wide open, and starts to slowly walk down the walkway on the side of my house that leads to the deck I'm standing on. He's moving awkwardly slow and a little hunched over, as if he was hiding behind a short, invisible wall. I'm frozen. My brain isn't working fast enough to process what this man is doing, approaching me in the middle of the night. Meanwhile, my dog is still behind the shed, sniffing oblivious to the stranger in our yard. He gets about 20 feet away from me, still too dark to see his face, and never breaking eye contact. When he starts reaching into his pocket, I gasped, and it was enough to grab my dog's attention. She casually walks from around the shed and sees the man. Immediately, she starts to chase after him, and is barking so loud it is echoing through the otherwise silent street. He reacted quickly and ran back to his car, speeding off and scraping the bottom of his car on all the speed bumps, not slowing down. I got my dog inside, thanked her with tons of love and treats, and called 911. I reported a suspicious person, since he didn't really harm or threaten me. The most he did was trespass. Due to the high rate of drug activity, an officer was only a couple of streets over, and in front of my house within minutes. He walked 3 yards looking for the man, while another officer drove around looking for the car that I poorly described. They didn't find him, and I stopped letting my dog out super late at night. I have since moved to a different state, a bigger house with a bigger, fenced-in yard, and now have 3 dogs. But to the man in the beat-up silver car, let's not meet again. 2. First off, I just want to state that I changed names in this story, and omitted them entirely when necessary. This happened this morning at about 10 AM. The backstory. Working full-time as a student leaves me with very little time for me under normal circumstances. Classes just ended not long ago, and lots of folks have left my university town to go back home for the holidays. I work in a coffee shop, so people going back home means not only am I catching a break from school right now, but work is usually super slow as well, and this has been beyond beneficial for my mental state. The story. I usually reserve the use of marijuana for times when my UC is flaring or to gain back appetite lost for some reason. But as I somehow ended up working 9 to 5 Monday to Friday this week, with the entire weekend off, a nice treat to get 2 off in a row, and me recovering from a mild hangover from last night, I figured I could probably smoke before lunch, play some vidya, and be useful by the time lunch needs to be made. I roll one, slide my balcony door over, and smoke. This is fine, I tell myself. I deserve this after a long week, some time to myself. I have nothing to do today, so I'm sure being high in the middle of the day won't be an issue. I don't have to see anyone today. After patting myself on the back for a few more minutes than needed, I slide the door shut and huddle up in a blanket on the couch. I was the only one awake in my apartment this morning, and I could hear someone in the hallway. All of a sudden, there are 3 hurried knocks at my door, and I bolt up. Oh fuck, did I forget someone was coming to meet me? I think as I look through the peephole to see a middle-aged man with Homer Simpson hair, transition lenses, and a handful of gold-colored wrapped presents. He's also fucking around on his phone when I look out. And I see the unit directly across the hall is getting Dominoes, and the driver is standing in their doorway. Not feeling uneasy considering the audience, I open the door. The man greets me and starts to walk in. I stand firm in the doorway, and once he realizes I'm not moving and he's trying to slide between myself and a lamp, which he nearly knocks over, he sticks his hand out. "I'm Terry." So I shake his hand, firm, while I'm staring him in the eye, still confused. Keep in mind that, though I was trying to look tough, I'm a fair-skinned blonde man with cracked lips in my pajamas, and eyes are definitely red and glossy. "I'm her father," he tells me. I thought I remembered our roommate mentioning that her father is a tall black man, and this gentleman was not only white, but probably standing at about 5 foot solid. "Oh, you're Linda's father." Important that I spoke her name. "Let me go let her know you're here, hold on." And I make my way down the hallway to knock on her bedroom door, next to my fiancé and I's shared room. I go and knock and say there's a visitor for her. And by the time I knock, he is right behind me, still fucking about with his phone while holding those presents in his hands. Now I have to do this shitty awkward slide by him in my own apartment. I figured I'd leave him be. He seemed beyond excited to be there to visit his daughter, so I make my way back to the living room. Before I can even lay down again, I hear, "No, I'm Jane's father," from down the hall. The motherfucker isn't here for my roommate. He's either lost or actively trying to see our apartment, for some reason. I bolt right up and make my way down the hallway, half tripping over things since I'm sitting at about 8 at this point, as I see him going for the doorknob to my bedroom where my sleeping fiancé lies. I got a little loud, usually not in my character, however. I'm high on my last day off, and there's a stranger possessing far too many red flags about to walk in on the love of my life, and told him that he's in the wrong unit. As I tell him this, he must have been dialing on his phone while talking to my roommate, because he pulls his phone to his face and goes, "I'm here, baby," and tries to ignore me. I repeated myself a little louder, and he asks where he is. "Unit 14, I'll show you the door." And the pizza guy is still there in the doorway when I sent him out, Terry asking his phone which floor she's on. That's when I realize this entire thing happened in about 2 minutes, and the pizza guy and I share a look of solidarity as I lock my door. My roommate came out, and we chatted about how fucking weird that is. She laughs since I somehow handled it well, ish, from the orbit only medicinal-grade marijuana can send you to. And I log into PlayStation to let the story out to one of my mates over a few matches of Overwatch. Here's where it gets interesting. So, around 2 PM, my fiancé wakes up. We both had a long night. I only wound up having a drink or two, thanks to my UC and IBS limiting me from going all out. But she went buck wild before bed and was nursing a bad hangover. I was sober by this point and mostly over the whole ordeal, having had a nap since then, and it almost felt like it was a dream. I mentioned offhand that a man came by, and she says it kind of woke her up. She remembers hearing someone familiar in the apartment. I explain the whole story, and she asks me what he looked like. This could be purely coincidental, but I guess about a month ago while I was at work, and she was between classes, a man fitting the description right down to the transition lenses came beating on the door asking to open up. Unfortunately, I forgot exactly the details of that encounter, and she's sleeping next to me now, so I can't ask. But he seems to keep thinking our unit is someone else's, or he's just trying to get a viewing of our fully furnished unit without the tour guide. Leaves a bad taste in my mouth now thinking about it. 3. This happened to me about 2.5 years ago. I was 19 at the time. I'm only 5'2.5". Yes, the half-inch matters when you're this damn short. I'm a female. I had moved to Seattle from a small town in California. My dad had always raised me to be aware of my surroundings and taught me how to defend myself at a young age. I knew if something bad happened, I would at least go down fighting. Seattle is a generally beautiful area, depending on what part you're in. It's a big city, so it's an eclectic melting pot of any kind of human you could imagine. Rich, poor, unstable, successful, beautiful, disgusting, rude, kind. Basically any adjective. Then antonym for it could describe the kind of people that live there. Gunshots were a frequent noise. Sketchy glances from people with drug-induced sniffles were tossed around daily. There are track marks, like speed bumps in a school lot, on the arms of some hazy-eyed lost souls that wander around bus stops and bars. You couldn't go into a store without seeing someone steal something, or attempt to. Someone was always talking to themselves at least 20 feet away from you most of the time, if you were in a populated area. Anyone that's from Seattle can tell you that there is a high rate of severely mentally ill people wandering around, filtering in and out of the justice system, instead of getting mental help or medication. It was October. Seattle notoriously rains on and off, so a big black hooded jacket in my backpack was always a must. I liked keeping my hood up for the general rule of thumb that weirdos don't really mess with weirdos. But this night was different, and I hadn't brought my normal nighttime creep attire. What I was wearing doesn't mean I deserve to be harassed, but dressing like a creep at night saved me from anyone wanting to interact most of the time, so it was just something I did to be more comfortable and look less approachable. This night I had worn a dress and forgot a jacket, so I looked really put together and friendly. I probably also looked stupid, since it was October and I didn't have a jacket. My friend had moved into my home to escape an abusive ex from our tiny town. She was just as short as me, and we were often told we looked like sisters. We decided to go downtown for her first adventure since moving in. That was our first mistake. We go downtown at around 10 p.m., thanks to public transportation. That was fine because in Seattle the bus runs late, so we had a way home. Window shopping wasn't an option because stores had closed. Around 10 p.m. during a weeknight, most sit-in fast foods were closing, and it was the end of the month, so we couldn't afford anything to eat. I googled where a McDonald's that was still open on the inside was, so we could get 2 burgers. It was an hour's walk from where we were, so we decided to head off in that direction. As we got further and further towards our destination, the lights became more scarce and the area looked more and more seedy as we passed buildings. My phone went black out of nowhere. I had an iPhone, so it was not really surprising because that piece of shit was always on the fritz. My friend only had a flip phone, so it was useless in terms of directions. We decided to just keep walking and hope we find our destination by luck. That was our second mistake. We walked and walked for what felt like a lifetime. Still nowhere to eat. Fuck. By now we were in a shittily lit area, across the street from a bar. We hear a guy cussing, yelling, and freaking out. People started yelling back at him, telling him to get the fuck away from them and go somewhere else. We started laughing because the guy was clearly on drugs or had too much to drink, acting like a total loon. There was power in their numbers because the creep crossed to the side of the street we were on, after being scared off by 10 or more people. Our laughter stopped upon noticing that he was headed in our direction. Our hearts sank. He yelled, "Hey, slow down, nice legs." Of course, that was enough to make us speed up. "Hey, I'm talking to you bitches!" bellowed from what I assume was around 10 feet behind us. We start going faster. I opened my knife and held it in the palm of my hand, near my side so it was a bit hidden. Looked at my friend and told her to dial 911 as we were at a fast-paced jog. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. In that moment I knew that if anything happened, it would be solely on me to protect us. Everyone has fight or flight, but people forget to mention that the third option is freeze. Some people don't take any action at all, and that's their natural reaction to fear. He caught up to us. He tried to grab her arm. I managed to pry his hand off her arm by pushing him with all my might, still holding my pocket knife in my other hand. Staggering backwards from being pushed, he started coming towards us. "Call the cops now," I said. She didn't. She looked at me like a deer in the headlights, and that's when I could feel him behind me. I pushed her away and told her to walk the other way. Instead, she stood behind me, fucking petrified. Fear consumed her ability to move, and she was stuck. He was mumbling, calling us names for ignoring him, when he was giving us compliments. That's when he lunged at me, and I pulled my knife out into plain sight, not being hidden in my hand. I put it to his red sweater. Side note, if you're wondering what he looked like, he had a peppered, very long, scraggly beard. His lips were chapped and scabbed. He had beady eyes and long, dark hair that looked wet. All his clothes were dirty and torn. His scent could gag a maggot. After looking at my knife on him, he spit in my face and called me a cunt. I started just stabbing air since there was spit all over my face, and my vision wasn't awesome since I had stranger saliva in my eyes. I was yelling "fuck off" as loud as I could to draw attention to myself. My friend was still cowered behind me. He took off at speed, walking the other direction back towards the bar as I told her to call the cops. I wiped the spit off my face. She looked at me bewildered and ghost white. I grabbed her phone out of her hands and called. The 911 operator was useless. I told her my location and a description, and she sarcastically asked how they would find him if he walked away, and my description was like a lot of people that frequent downtown. The dispatcher told me I needed to stay there, or no one would bother to check out the scene without a witness. That wasn't comforting. I told her I would stay there and wait for an officer. My friend begged me to leave, but all that kept running through my mind was, what if he comes after people that had froze the way she did? What if he came after someone without a knife, or anything to defend themselves? I needed to wait for a cop. We hid behind a building, but in sight of traffic. Peeking behind the building, we could see he was pacing up and down the street, looking all around. 20 minutes passed, no cops. I called again. She told me they were on their way. 45 minutes pass. No cops. Called again. "We told you they were on their way." 1 hour later, my friend convinced me to leave, otherwise we would miss the last bus. We made it home safely. I cooked dinner. 2.5 hours later, I looked at my friend's phone. I had left in the living room as I cooked. There was a missed call from the police department. I did not bother calling back. Something horrible could have happened to us within the time that no one showed up. Cops drove by us. I even tried to flag one down, but he turned on his lights and started following someone through a stoplight. The man was probably long gone by then, and honestly, the dispatcher's sarcastic tone about my description really made me feel like, yeah, he does look like your run-of-the-mill bum, so who will care enough to find him over this? So, creep, I had to pull a knife on. Hopefully you will meet a cop that actually gives a fuck about putting fucks like you away, and let's never meet again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 259. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'd like to apologise to those of you who were perhaps expecting a subscriber's story today, a subscriber's video. It is Tuesday, and that is the usual day for it. I don't know if you can tell by the tone of my voice, I've got the flu. On top of everything else I'm dealing with, I've got the flu, so that's fun. So I decided to do this video because I actually already had one story recorded for it, so it was a bit less work for me to do it today. So I did that, and I'm now going to go and try and rest myself. Once this video is made, I'm going to watch some is Bros of Decay or Brothers of Decay videos, which is actually, if you heard me mention urban exploration videos a few days ago, someone recommended their channel in the comments, and it's two young guys from Belgium, Leslie and Jordy, and very polite, very respectful, charming young men, and their videos are quite detailed, well put together. And interestingly, one thing I have noticed is that unlike in the US and even in my own country, in the United Kingdom, the locations they go to, whereas here, the abandoned homes and that, they'll often get trashed, and or people will ransack them and steal from them, which is kind of disgusting, is what it is. Because even if it's abandoned, somebody somewhere down the line will likely own it somewhere, more often than not. But in Belgium, a lot of these places look like you could just go live there. And interestingly, because of the way the laws seem to work there, legally, everyone's entitled to a certain amount of electricity per month. So a lot of these abandoned homes, which again, nobody's living there, but whether or not someone owns it, in some cases they probably will, but it's certainly not being used and has been abandoned for many, many years. The electricity will work. You can turn the lights on and things like that, because there's a certain amount of free electricity I think people are given per month to just take care of the basics, which I think is a wonderful thing. We don't have that in the UK, and I think we should, because that would be very helpful, I think, to a lot of families that are struggling. Okay, anyway, I'm going to shut up for now and go. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.